Valorant has been out for 5 years now. It was created solely to be the next great esport. Unlike Counter-Strike and others before it, this game was engineered to be competitive. So much so that when the initial trailer released, 7 days later, Brax, the first ever pro player signed, joined an organization and got signed by T1. And this was a month before the game even came out into beta. But here we are, 5 years later, still talking about the game, and it's still a tier 1 esport. It's safe to say it's been pretty successful. But that doesn't mean that it hasn't came with its fair share of problems, issues, controversy, cheating, and currently match fixing. So this is the state of VCT.
What is that?
Thing still, Caron. Drop towards the back texture. Phantom play! And up to 4 beast.
He's gotten it to half. There's the flash. There's a swing! And Chronicle gets all 3! Heartbreak for G2! The orange and black banner waves on. Fnatic survive!
So we're going to break this down into 3 separate parts, as there are currently 3 issues that are heavily impacting the Valorant Champions Tour. The first problem is going to be scandals and kind of the inconsistencies at which they are handled. The second one is going to be the Tier 2, which seemingly has match fixing and a whole bunch of other issues currently. And the third thing is going to be the viewership decline, as the numbers, they don't look good. So I'm going to keep this short and sweet because I'm not here to change your opinion. I'm not here to even really talk about your opinion. I just want to recap how Riot has handled these events. So initially on March 10th, 2021, right after qualifying for the first Masters, a Sentinels player named Sinnott was accused of misconduct allegations. Sentinels benched the player within the day, and then later Riot would go on to suspend the player and requiring him to complete a conduct training evaluation, which he has not completed to this day. He has never played a competitive match again since that moment. Now, how they handled the situation is interesting, and that's what we want to talk about. Basically, a tweet was posted with a Google document kind of revealing misconduct allegations on the player. Sentinels benched him later that day. There's rumors that was pressure from Riot saying that, hey, we're going to take your master slot if you don't do something about this. And then Riot posted about it, name dropping the player, and then later banning the player. Now, the person who was alleging the misconduct later retracted, or didn't retract the statements, but rather quit pursuing it. So therefore, nothing happened legally. The player was never charged with anything. They were never found guilty. I don't think anyone on the internet knows the current truth other than those 2 people involved. But again, the topic of this is solely how Riot handled it. Now, if we look forward into the future, on May 17th of 2025, we had, unfortunately, a mirror image happen. A player by the name of Fluorescent also was hit with allegations of misconduct on X. And then the player, only difference at the time is that player was not currently participating in the league. The player was on a break, trying to take a small break from competition. Now, how did Riot handle it this time? Well, they didn't use their government name, that's for sure. They basically made a post saying something along the lines of, if you have any information, please report it to authorities. So as you see from the tweet, no mention of a Riot investigation, no mention of a suspension, and no mention of the person's name specifically. So how did the community respond to that? Well, they didn't love it. And they were very divided, very split. You had one camp of people who were stating that this doesn't look like how you handled the Sinatra case. We don't understand why this is different. You didn't use their government name this time. Feels like it's different. You have some people saying that this is nice because it seems like this company is evolving. They're transitioning, they're improving, they're becoming better, and this is how they should have handled that initial situation. And then lastly, you have a camp of people that are saying, hey, the only reason you're handling this differently is because the player is trans and this is in your games challengers community and it would be bad for your PR. So therefore, you're treating this like a softball. And at the end of the day, we don't really know how or why they did this, but we do know that it is inconsistent and it is different. Personally, the way that I believe these situations could be handled is just with more transparency, which is something Riot has never been willing to give. And it's something that they've always struggled to do with all of their announcements. So you lead to issues like this, to where you have maybe more dramatic or radical portions of your community coming up with crazy ideas and crazy theories that are probably not correct. However, with the inconsistent treatment as well as the inconsistent results and no real clear communication from Riot, you lead to a bunch of fear-mongering and rumors and drama and nonsense that doesn't need to be the case. You have clear and concise messaging this is an easy problem to solve, but unfortunately I feel like it's going to continue to plague both Riot, VCT, and all of their other games. Next up, in terms of cheating or the match fixing, this is not good. I think Sean Garris did a great job in a video where he kind of breaks down this. He reaches out, doing a bunch of investigative research. We'll link that down in the description below. You should totally check that out. He's not a Riot employee. He's not associated with them in any way. He's solely doing this for the community. And frankly, I think he's doing God's work. But I'm going to assume that it is fact that it is happening because it's very believable. All the evidence he has compiled makes me believe that this is for sure happening. So you have to ask yourself, why would this happen? Well, the harsh truth is franchising and Riot exclusive events. That's it. Point blank. There's nothing else to talk about. This is a Riot manufactured issue. So how do we get here? Well, you're a player in the lower ranks. You think it's very infeasible for you to be able to ascend all the way to the pro because the path to pro isn't good. Therefore, some random guy hits you up on Discord or Twitter and says, hey, meet me on Telegram, let's chat over there. I'm gonna give you 20 grand to throw a pistol round. It's a pretty tempting offer. I could understand why a lot of kids would take that, especially when, again, you do not think that your path to pro is gonna be achievable. You do not think that the future in Valorant is gonna be good for you. Frankly, if that's your belief, you should take the $20,000, start a streaming career, and maybe pivot to another game and just leave Valorant behind. And I know that's a really harsh thing to say, but that is the reality that we're currently living in. I mean, what do you have to lose at this current point? But now that the doom and gloom is over, let's try to look at what is the actual solution. We have to get more eyes on the games themselves, more eyes on the lower levels. If you get more eyes on the lower levels, it makes it harder to cheat because obviously more people are watching it, it would be more obvious. But then also, if more people are watching the thing, then there's more money from more sponsors in the thing. So then the lower ranks actually get a little bit more income. It becomes a more sustainable living because $20,000 to a person who is 17, 18, 19 years old trying to make their career in this game, that's probably more than they would make in a year from competing. So it's obvious why it's tempting. And it's also obvious that this is, again, a Riot manufactured issue. So lastly, viewership decline. Now this one really wraps up the two previous ones as well, but all in all, super TLDR, 25% viewership decline this year as opposed to last year, and I don't think that's going to be improving. And that 25% decline is only total number of hours watched with a higher number of hours streamed. So it's probably a doubly bad statistic. And I mean, frankly, from Tins himself, he said this, and I think it's great insight.
Do you miss the feeling of playing on stage with the crowd? I think like playing on stage with the crowd is something I do miss of being a pro player, but it feels like it never happened. So in like a larger perspective, everything to get to that point isn't worth it in my opinion. But like actually being there, experiencing the crowd, playing those matches, it is very fun. And nothing does beat it in terms of like enjoyment for Valorant, in my opinion. I felt like I never played any matches. Like for me, I got burnt out from like never being able to play the game and just always be practicing. And that's one of my like biggest things with Valorant is like, even if we qualified for 2 events, 3 events, it feels like you just never play the game. What type of tournaments they should do? I'll be quite honest. I understand why these companies do franchising and stuff, but I think franchising sucks, and I'll just be honest. I hate it. Why do you hate franchising? You just don't play any matches. And also, I think scenes were a lot more competitive when it was an open circuit previously. When franchising came out, we lost like 3/4 of the orgs that are currently in the scene. And so because there's less people playing like the game at like a higher level and actually getting paid to do it, and like they can drop stuff, people were getting a lot better in the short period that it was open circuit.
Some people are saying this is because of Tins himself, as this is a post-Tins era, was not playing in the season this year, therefore viewership down. Some people blame this on co-streaming or a lot of other things, but in my opinion, take the man for what he said. There's 3 problems. You don't play enough, there's franchising, and there's no open circuits. Point blank, I think those right there are the biggest issues. If we dive into the first one, which is franchising, in 2023, Valorant decided that they were going to go the franchising route. They were going to pick 5 teams from America, and they started a process to where you could apply to get in. And obviously, again, with Riot, there was a lot of controversy. G2, one of the industry titans who's actually in Valorant now, initially wasn't selected. And why weren't they selected? Well, it's because the then CEO Carlos was seen partying with Andrew Tate, and Riot didn't want to have to interact or deal with that, so therefore they pulled their plug at the last moment and swapped them in for EG. G2 did inevitably get in, but that's obviously not good. Next up was TSM. They didn't get in because of Reginald, who had some workplace issues, and people don't like working with him, so they moved on past TSM. And then next was FaZe Clan, who at the time was working a lot with cryptocurrency, They didn't think that was good for their business and, you know, how their fans work and all of that. They didn't want to do it, which is a little ironic considering their current primary sponsor is Coinbase. And then lastly, who at the time was one of the biggest orgs in all of Valorant, Optic, they didn't get in because they didn't think that they were financially and fiscally responsible. So they didn't want to go that route either. Now, if you want to talk about this purely from a viewership standpoint, you look at Call of Duty and Halo, the green wall supports those so heavily. Like, honestly, it might be the reason that those two games are still going on is because Optic is a part of them. TSM, if you go to a League of Legends event today, the stadium still rings with TSM chants, and they've not been good for a decade. And then if you look at FaZe Clan, they're culturally one of the most impactful organizations in all of gaming and esports. So it's safe to say there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of viewers left on the table solely because of that decision. And again, that's not to say that I think those organizations deserve a spot in spite of others. Valorant, at the end of the day, made the choice to say there were only going to be 5 teams. They could have said there were 8. They could have said there were 12. They could have picked any number. They chose this format. They gave themselves these handcuffs. And here we are, years later, looking into viewership decline, asking ourselves why. And it's like, maybe this could be the reason. Maybe you shouldn't have taken the most popular team in your game, who is one of the best teams in your game, and not given them a franchise slot. So that here we are a couple years later being like, hey, why are the views bad? So next up is the infamous "we will not be killing the tier 2 scene," proceeding by immediately killing the tier 2 scene. Now, I think the initial intent of what they were doing with VCT was probably very good. It was really well received from the public. It was not really well received from the players or org owners. I mean, you even had Jason Lake saying this is a very expensive gamble with minimal upside and a low probability of success. And frankly, that's exactly what it was. It's one of those where it doesn't seem like it's worth it to invest in the lower ranked teams so that you can hopefully win all the way through to get Ascension, to get one slot in your region. So as we mentioned before, there's 5 teams in America, but there's 10 teams in the Americas because you also have the South American region as well. So of those per year, 1 team can ascend up into that event. And then there's some parameters on their success on how long they will be there and how long they get to stay. Then hopefully they can inevitably get accepted in or maybe replace another team in the permanent roster of teams. And that's convoluted and it's confusing and it's hard for me to explain to you, much less as an org owner. It's something that I would not have a lot of confidence in trying to invest a ton of money into doing. And due to the limitation of the tier 2, it's very infrequent that a rookie sensation will come in and steal the hearts and minds of the whole league. And instead, we're left with a whole bunch of old heads playing each other maybe 4 to 5 times a year. And that leads us to probably the biggest issue of this whole thing, which is the frequency of matches. In the current capacity, they do just simply not play enough matches. When you look at something like Counter-Strike, Vitality currently is on a 30-match winning streak. On their previous 30, that dates all the way back to the beginning of February. If G2, which is arguably the most dominant organization in VCT right now, wanted to have that same 30-match win streak, it would go all the way back to August 15th, 2024. And again, that's with the favor of them being in some losers bracket runs and some deeper runs. That is not a whole lot of matches. And then when you look at a fan favorite like 100 Thieves, when you look at their previous 30 matches, it would take you back 365 days to the date where they were in Masters Shanghai. That's completely unacceptable. If you're a 100 Thieves fan, the fact that you hopefully, maybe, get 30 games played in a year, that's just, again, unacceptable. And that's something that I think is reasonably easy to solve. Because if you open up the events to more open circuit events, then you can go and have non-VCT sanctioned functions happening and VCT sanctioned functions happening. I'm not saying VCT need to expand and do more and try to continue with an increased volume of events. I think you just add third-party providers. Like last weekend, for example, was DreamHack. 60,000 people went to DreamHack. It had 12 different esports competing for $2 million. It had over 22 million hours of watch time online from its competition. You don't think those people would enjoy some Valorant? You don't think those people would enjoy watching G2, 100 Thieves, and Sentinels? Because I'm certain that they would. And that event does not have to be put on, again, by Riot. ESL could handle that, or maybe PGL does one, or whoever else, Blast, it doesn't matter. But allowing for those additional third-party event providers, it also increases the quality of the content. Because again, in Counter-Strike, the reason the broadcast and production and all that look so good is because those guys are competing with each other. Valve doesn't run those events. ESL does not want to look worse than PGL, and they don't want to look worse than Blast. So everybody ups their production quality, increases what they can do to incentivize the players to participate and the fans to spectate. And that's something that Riot just simply doesn't have. When you look at it from a G2's fan perspective, seeing G2 play more doesn't make you less happy, it makes you more happy. Riot currently is trying to control their ecosystem, and it feels like they're trying to make VCT live on a concept of scarcity. And they're trying to make it feel like their matches are more important and more rare, again, because they're scarce. When in reality, the only thing they're doing is allowing their fans, the people who are interested in the game, and the players, they're starting to forget them. And that's not at all what their intent is, but that's what the result is. So if you ask me what the current state of VCT is, I would say it's dying. And frankly, it might soon be dead.